you want, basically. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, so we're live now?
You're live now.
Oh, well then, hi, everybody. All right. It's a strange feeling addressing a screen, so I'll do my best to make it look lively, but I appreciate the work that's gone into putting this conference together. So let's start the evening off on a high note. Good evening, my fellow environmentalists. I say that with full pride and confidence because we all wouldn't be here tonight doing the work we do if we took our municipalities, our state, and our planet for granted. My name is Simon Skolnick, and I'm the president of the New York State Association of Conservation Commissions, known more quickly as NYSACC, that is celebrating its 50th anniversary conference on the environment. Our opening speaker tomorrow morning, Assemblymember Steve Otis, who is with us tonight, will talk about what NYSACC's 50 years have meant to our state. I will give proper acknowledgement to the Westchester County Conservation Commission members and Sustainability Committee members who put in countless hours, day and night, to put this conference together at tomorrow morning's opening portion of our conference. But I do want to say that we gave very serious consideration as to how we wanted our conference to open. And there was no other choice but to start it with this legislative roundtable. Wow, I wish I could say as I look around me, but it is what it is. You know, I'm looking at very, very, very wonderful people, but not in person. I do want to say that we gave a lot of consideration to how this process would start. And I wanted to also say how fortunate can our state be to have such dedicated public servants from all corners of New York who work tirelessly to protect our state's natural environment. So enough of this speechifying. You came here to meet our legislators, hear from them directly about what is happening environmentally statewide. I'm extremely happy to introduce them. We have Assemblyman Steve Englebright from District 4, which covers the North Shore of Suffolk County. Assemblyman Englebright is chair of the New York State Assembly Committee on Environmental Conservation. We have Senator Pete Harckham, New York State District 40, which covers parts of Westchester, Putnam, and Dutchess counties. And he's the chairman of the Committee on Alcoholism and Substance Abuse, which I can understand. I could use some of that abuse tonight, quite honestly. We also have Ashley Dougherty, Legislative Director to New York State Senator Todd Kaminsky, District 9, South Shore of Nassau County, who's the chair of the Senate Environmental Conservation Committee. By the way, that's my home district when I was living on Long Island. I lived in Valley Stream, so I have an attachment to the District 9. We also, I'm very happy to have Dr. Anna Kelles, a New York State Assembly member from District 125, Central New York State, Tompkins County, and the southwest of Cortland County. And finally, we have Steve Otis, New York State Assembly member of District 91, the Long Island Sound towns, New Rochelle to Portchester and Westchester County, and also a board member of NYSACC. So I'd like just to go over the procedure, what we're going to be following tonight. Each of our speakers will provide an opening remark, and then you will have the opportunity to ask your questions. I will be assisted tonight by John Rhodes, who's also a board member of NYSACC. And I'm going to open the questions by first asking Assembly Member Steve Englebright and Ashley Dougherty regarding what they felt was the most important environmental accomplishment this session. So I'll go first with Assembly Member Englebright.
Oh, very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate your invitation and all the work that you do. I would just want to mention, parenthetically, I was on the Brookhaven Town Conservation Advisory Council for the better part of 10 years, back at a time when I had brown hair and it was somewhat younger, but it was important work, and I have some sense of the value of the combined effort that all of you who are participating here this evening and in this conference into tomorrow contribute to the protection of the state's environmental resources, and I salute you and thank you for your good work. The most important things for this year that I want to mention in this short time that I'll have a chance to speak is that we have the Green Amendment on the ballot this year. That is a chance for us to amend the state's constitution to make the right to clean air, clean water, and a healthful environment a part of the basic rights of being a citizen in the state. And so I would encourage you all to do within your jurisdictions to do all that you can to help get the vote out to make sure that this passes for a number of reasons. The obvious first reason is because it's really important to elevate environmental protection to the same level as freedom of association and freedom of speech and other constitutional rights. When we formed our nation, we didn't really anticipate that environment was going to, there would be a need for the environment to be a part of the Constitution. But today, our environment is under siege, and along with it, the health and well-being of our citizens. And I think it's appropriate that we encourage passage of the Green Amendment, and I encourage each of you to participate in that. And another reason for that is because it's a set in place for the Environmental Bond Act, which will be next year. So in answer to your question, what is the most important environmental accomplishment in this session, I would have to point toward this Green Amendment and the Environmental Bond Act. And our new governor has enhanced the expectation of its benefits by raising it to a $4 billion authorization. That's money that we're going to need if we're going to meet the challenges of climate change and all of the conservation needs of the state. We need a reservoir of a goodwill within our citizenry to be translated into a reservoir of actual dollars that we can draw upon to do many of the important projects around the state for everything from waterfront revitalization to protecting drinking water and providing for recharge stations for the automobiles and trucks that will be running on electricity instead of gasoline, hopefully in the near term. I've had the pleasure of being the chair of the Environmental Conservation Committee since 2015, and I focused in that time on a wide range of issues, including the Environmental Protection Fund. I would like to see it enhanced and enlarged in the next year, but I just want to say, as I yield to the presence of Ashley Dougherty, that it's been a tremendous privilege to work with Todd Kaminsky. I know he's up to his ears in alligators these days as he's running for office this year as well. But he is a model for getting things done and understanding the importance of emphasizing environmental matters within the scope of all of his activities. So once again, Simon Skolnick, thank you so much for inviting me, and let me yield at this point back to you.
Okay, so I sort of strangled the beginning already by asking the question before the introduction. So let's stay with that thought. So Ashley, I'll let you give your opening statements, and then please address the question.
Well, I'm gonna, maybe it'd be easier to quickly address the question if that's okay. I can do it pretty
That's
quick.
fine.
Just while it's in my head, I would say we're in total agreement. Getting the Bond Act across the finish line this year in the budget is huge. That will be a big lift next year on the ballot. And, hope, the new governor has supported it and has also stated about the interest of increasing it. There hasn't been funding like that before. And it will go a great way towards also urban heat jungles, greener schools, water, infrastructure, sewers, out in Long Island, I know is a hot topic, and everything we're facing with climate change, the time is now to make those type of investments. And then I also know the senator would definitely want to mention, the work he did with Assemblyman Englebright on the Family and Firefighter Protection Act. We're very close to being the first state in the entire United States to ban the most dangerous flame retardants from electronics displays. There's only the European Union's done that. We're probably going to join in with mattresses and other furniture. That's about 13 other states, but that will go a long way in protecting children, our families, and our firefighters from being harmed from this. And we're hopeful the governor will be signing it soon. But I would say those are two big accomplishments. There's been a lot this year. But I do want to say thank you for, inviting our office here today, and congratulations on your 50th anniversary. As has been told, I work with Senator Kaminsky, and I serve as his legislative director and counsel, and also have the pleasure of working with the Environmental Conservation Committee due to his role as the chair. As we all know, we're currently under the threat of climate change, and I think everyone recognizes we need to take steps to preserve our environment and our earth for not just our generation, the ones to come, and then the generations after that. Luckily the state has already taken bold actions by passing the CLCPA, but there's more we can do, from improving our recycling systems to decreased waste and emissions, to prioritizing open space conservation efforts through things like 30 by 30 or improving wetland protection. And right now we really depend on the environment to bring us joy, from recreation or hiking or fishing, but also everything's like food, clean water, regulating disease, pollution, sequestering healthier, air. So it's important we recognize that. And through that, I know we're here at, your guys' conference, and we can obtain a lot of that through managing open space programs, protecting our community's natural green infrastructure, and providing places for recreation in, populated areas. And I know there's more to do, and the Senate and the Assembly has done a lot this year, but a lot of excitement for next year, and the different ballot initiatives, and we continue to look forward to what the state will do to combat climate change.
Thank you.
Thank you again for having us.
Thank you. I'd like to then go to Senator Harckham. Let's revert back to what I had originally intended. Please give your opening remarks, and we'll continue that way, and then we'll go to a question.
Thank you, Simon. We roll easy, so it's all good. Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you to NYSACC and Chairman Englebright and Chairman Kaminsky. We're so fortunate to have two such great environmental leaders in both houses, and to Steve and Anna, my friends and colleagues who we work with closely. It's really great to be here, and special thanks to NYSACC. Simon had asked me to comment on some environmental challenges in my district, which is sort of lower Hudson Valley. And, obviously climate change is there with everybody. Couple of examples: since 2008, when I was first elected to the Westchester County Board and started working on storm recovery, we've had to rebuild the electric grid in Northeast Westchester 4 times due to 100-year storms that came every year, every 4 years. And that's not to mention the localized devastation year after year after year. In my district, we're spending $60 million to elevate a section of the Sawmill River Parkway because of flooding, and rising sea levels make it much harder for the Sawmill River itself to drain. So these are the kind of impacts that we're seeing on a daily basis, not to mention the tragic deaths of 5 people in Westchester, during Ida. So, the impacts are here. Some of them are a little more subtle and are exacerbating other challenges. I represent the east of Hudson watershed, provides a drinking water to 1 million people, the backup water source for all of New York City. And phosphorus is a massive issue. Excess phosphorus, a lot of it comes from leaking septic systems. It causes blue-green algae, causes eutrophication. But part of that is exacerbated by climate change because phosphorus lays dormant on the base of the lakes and the ponds. But when the water temperature heats up, it releases the phosphorus, creating the blue-green algae, providing nutrients for invasive species. And this is a massive, massive challenge, not just in my district, but all across New York State. And we really need to get a handle on some kind of a plan for blue-green algae. And Steve Otis and I are working on one aspect of that together. On the climate side, Chairman Englebright and I passed a bill this year that Governor Hochul signed into law that will require all vehicles sold or leased in New York be zero emissions by 2035. That was a huge win. And thanks to Ashley and Todd for all of their help in getting that across. But that was a big win. And that will help signal to the marketplace exactly what Steve was talking about, that we need to ramp up our charging infrastructure. I've got a similar bill with power lawn equipment, much shorter time frame. We just introduced that, 5 years. And then lastly, the other real environmental challenge of many that I'd like to talk about in my district is the decommissioning and the safe decommissioning of Indian Point. And in the CLCPA, we talk about a just transition. Well, we're kind of writing the textbook for that as we go along. And part of that was some of the legislative things that we did, the creation, working with the former governor of the Decommissioning Oversight Board, because quite frankly, nobody really trusts the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to do that. So it's a combination of state agencies, nuclear experts, environmentalists, and elected officials who will be on the ground overseeing that process. And we talk about environmental justice communities. The village of Buchanan will be a de facto nuclear waste site forever because the federal government never got its act together on waste site. And so what are we going to do for economic redevelopment when you've got casks and casks and casks of spent nuclear fuel there? So a lot of challenges going on. But I feel very energized. We have great leadership, as I mentioned, on both committees. You have so many legislators in both houses who are committed to working on these issues. And I'm just excited for the conversation this evening. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I guess we'll go next with Assemblywoman Dr. Anna Kelles, opening remarks and a response to the question of what do you think was the most important environmental accomplishments this session? And you're muted.
No, I'm here. I actually, Steve will appreciate this. I was just speaking to one of the main authors of a scientific journal article that really was the impetus of the CLCPA. Dr. Jacobson, and he will hopefully be speaking next Wednesday. So that is helpful. And I will now explain what I mean by that. But to address some of the accomplishments this year, some of them are finished wins. Some of them are progress in motion. One of the big ones that we had in my local area, but I think it's really important because it shows both the impact of local community outreach and also how that impact can really influence state decisions. So there's a huge property of land on Cayuga Lake waterfront. It includes a long stretch of waterfront and then expands into agricultural land. And there was a negotiation between the Finger Lakes Land Trust and NYSACC, that was the owner of that land for years. And then all of a sudden, announcement was put out that it was going up for auction to be developed for residential purposes. This would have been a huge loss of several hundred, I think up to 500 feet of waterfront property and virgin forest lands, but also it is home for several endangered plant species. And one of the main forest land tracts in this area for 4 bird species that have been identified to be on decline. And there was a huge outreach by the community. We had about 4,500 community members send emails to the PSC, Governor Hochul. It was a bipartisan issue. Senator Helming and myself, we sent a letter to the governor and to the PSC and the DEC. And 2 weeks ago, the NYSACC announced that they were withdrawing the public hearing and that they would resume negotiations with Finger Lakes Land Trust to preserve that land. Finger Lakes Land Trust will be purchasing it in the name of the DEC. DEC will then purchase that, and it'll hopefully become state forest land. And that is a huge win for the whole state. So that is one. Another thing that I worked on and that Steve Englebright supported me on in the budget, which was a bigger win than people realize, was a couple of years ago, the funding for the soil health program at Cornell was cut in half. And this year, I put forward a proposal to bring that back to whole in the budget, which it was, and that was included in the final budget. And why this is important is because we now know that we will probably end up being the breadbasket for the United States again in the next 10, 20 years, given climate change. And it is extremely important that we preserve our agricultural soil, because it is one of the sources of soil sequestration. It's the skin of the earth. And having sustainable agricultural practices is critical, and that's what the soil health study does. It evaluates the impact of practices and also both the impact of conventional agriculture as well as the impact on soil quality for sustainable practices, various sustainable practices like low-till, no-till, cover crops, rotation. Those are just to name a few, really a few of a large group of things that they study. So that was a huge win. Just to note for anybody who hasn't studied soil health, and I nerd out on it all the time, is that an inch of soil, which is a living organism, if you really understand it, takes about 100 to 500 years to build, to create. The current industrial conventional agriculture, it takes up to 50 to 60 years to completely destroy the soil. So this is big. This is huge. Another thing that I have focused on, and it's still in motion, and something that people know of me, and an obsession of mine, is cryptocurrency mining. So I have brought forward a bill that would put a moratorium on cryptocurrency mining in power plants that use fossil fuels. And it would also require the DEC to do a full environmental impact assessment. And the reason that I consider this a win is because January of this year, no one was talking about cryptocurrency, and certainly not cryptocurrency mining, or really understanding the difference. And now I can have savvy conversations with almost all of my colleagues. It has gone all over the world as a hot topic, and most importantly, we have one of the first cryptocurrency mining companies that has purchased a power plant. So for anybody who really quickly that doesn't understand cryptocurrency, it's a digital currency using blockchain technology. And blockchain is just blocks of information that each have a unique identifier. It's held in a large ledger. The most important thing about it is it's decentralized and instantaneous exchange of information. In those blocks, you can have any information, exchange of medical data, exchange of educational data, or an exchange of a currency, buying and selling of a currency. But those transactions need to be validated. Just like when you stick your card in an ATM machine, and the first thing it asks is a PIN code, right? It wants you to validate you are who you say you are, and then you can interact with it. Well, in digital currencies, they have to validate those transactions too, but they are not governed by a government or banks, so they have to be validated by the users. And there are different methods to validate those transactions. And that's where the crux of cryptocurrency is really important, understanding that, because there are different methods to validate transactions. There's proof of work, proof of stake, proof of space, proof of time. There's many different types. It just so happens that proof of work is the only one that's competitive in nature, meaning that there's a mathematical equation assigned to each transaction, and people compete with each other to solve that mathematical equation. And whoever does wins currency. Instead of buying it or selling it, they win it. But that equation gets harder over time, and there's no software that can be designed to get an edge over solving that equation over anybody else, which means the only way you can solve it is having more computers. That's the issue. And that's where this business, this industry developed, where people consolidate more and more and more and more and more computers running 24/7 to get an edge over other people to win currency, which means they use an insane amount of energy, a lot of water, right? A lot of things, natural resources to power those computers. So they try and minimize their electrical costs. And one of the smartest ways to do that, if you don't really care about the environment, is to just buy your own power plant. So old retired power plants are being bought up, turned back on, running 24/7, 365 days out of the year to give an advantage. And it just so happens the first one in the country was on Seneca Lake. So it pulls in 130 million gallons of water a day at about 40 to 60 degrees temperature. And it can spit it back out into a Class C trout stream at about 86 degrees temperature in the summer and about 108 degrees temperature in the winter. Trout show signs of stress and start dying at 70 degrees. And so it is very consumptive of natural resources. And they earn about 8 coin a day, win about 8 coin a day, which is about $440,000 for them. They're doubling their computer capacity by December, which means they will earn about $1 million a day. And they give the local community a very small amount of that. In fact, about the amount of money that they can make in a day. So they're buying us for cheap, and they're making a tremendous amount of money that they sell on the international market. People now understand that. Everybody is talking about it, and that is a huge movement forward. Where previously, I had legislators who asked me, is that a computer game? Where now people understand this is a really big deal. This is the equivalent of the new age of natural gas extraction. This is the digital version of natural gas extraction. And it is happening right here in the Finger Lakes. Why? Because we have cool temperatures, we have the cleanest air, and we have free fresh water, surface water. We are one of the last places on the planet that has fresh water, surface fresh water. So this is now or never. This bill made it through the Senate. It didn't make it through the Assembly. The argument is that it creates jobs, it's high tech, it's moving tech into the state. The truth is, it doesn't create jobs. It uses a lot of natural resources, and it's not an answer to climate change, which is one of the arguments, which I can certainly answer if people have questions. So I'm hoping it'll pass this coming year because it will create a moratorium on any new facilities. The reason it's important is because there are others that are following suit. There's another facility trying to open up on right outside of Buffalo, and there are about 28 other retired power plants in upstate New York that could be targets next. There are another 3 that I know of that are working in that direction. So this is extremely time sensitive. So we've gone from 0 to 60. We need to get to 100 in the next couple months. We need this to pass in January, but it's a huge win because the world is looking. I've been getting interviews nationally, internationally, calls from federal legislators who are now looking at what we're doing in New York State. We will set the trend in New York State when we need to do it. So it's a huge win to get it on everyone's radar and get as far as we've done in 6 months. And I'm very excited about it.
Thank you. One of the comments, thank you very much. One of the comments was that Anna crushes it. So I guess you have some fans out there. Just as an aside, we had discussed with Dr. Kelles the opportunity of doing a workshop. I think we just got that workshop, so I appreciate that very much. Last but not least is Steve Otis, who I have known. I don't know, how long has it been, Steve? 30 years or something in that neighborhood. Steve, besides all his accomplishments, is a board member of NYSACC. and will be our opening speaker at tomorrow's session. So again, Steve, welcome, and please opening remarks, and please respond to the original question of what you thought was the most important environmental accomplishments of this session.
Well, it's great to be here and with partners, because we have our Senate partners. Steve Englebright does a great job chairing the Environmental Conservation Committee in the Assembly. And Anna, I've worked closely with on a few issues. I think one of the highlights, and everything that everyone has mentioned, I'm not going to repeat those highlights, but they're certainly there. I think the thing that one of my favorite issues, and an issue that everybody has touched on and brings us together, is the variety of very important water issues. And it's something I think everybody on the panel today has worked on, and I've interfaced with. But when I first joined my local conservation commission in the late 80s, I used to say in the 80s that water was the issue of the 80s, and no one really paid attention. But today, I do think people get it, that water issues are paramount. And so one of the other highlights in this legislative session, and it is something that the legislature and the governor have been strong on for a number of years, is doing a lot more about water issues around the state. We have in this year's budget a new $500 million commitment towards clean water programs. There was a mention in one of the questions about emerging contaminants, and a big increase in state money towards emerging contaminants issues all over the state, a lot of it on Long Island, and very positive. But we have now really the most generous grant program in the state of clean water grants that go to every corner of the state. Very important. So that was sort of one of the big victories. But the water issues come in a lot of places. We're all working on wetlands issues. Pete Harckham is working on that. Steve Englebright is working on that and trying to improve our wetland protection. I am very involved in the cryptocurrency mining issue with Anna Kelles, and actually went to school in the Finger Lakes. And one of the interesting issues about Anna mentioned saving this property on Lake Cayuga and the opportunity there. One of the issues in the Finger Lakes, a water quality issue, is increasing runoff, and what is that doing to the water quality in the Finger Lakes? And so there are many aspects to the clean water issues. I'm going to mention one. Steve Englebright mentioned our Environmental Bond Act, which is supposed to be on the ballot last year, and it wasn't because of COVID. It's going to be on the ballot next year. One of the things that the legislature added is $100 million for a new grant program for stormwater grants to municipalities. And what we went through with the recent storms that Pete Harckham mentioned and the damages, we realized that our municipalities need help on their stormwater management. And so my hope is that maybe we can jumpstart that program in this year's state budget, even in advance of the bond issue, because there's an urgency towards local governments needing help, not just what they're getting now, which is grants for drinking water and for their sanitary sewer systems. They need help now with stormwater management funds. So I think that's the highlight I'll talk about. I'm going to mention one other issue, which is something that the legislature weighed in on that is important, especially to our audience of Conservation Commission members and local environmental advocates, sustainability committee folks, is that in the Environmental Protection Fund, we added, made sure that there's money in there for municipal recycling, which is an important thing at the local level. We added money for municipal parks, and we also have, one other issue, we have some money, but we need to do a lot more. And this is something that Steve Englebright, I know, is very concerned about, and I chair a committee on science and technology, which is electric charging stations in this state. We're going to be moving to electric vehicles very quickly. All the manufacturers are going to be doing it. And we do not currently have the charging station infrastructure to meet the demand that's going to be there for these vehicles. And transportation emissions are a big part of our climate change challenge. And what we're going to have to do to meet our targets, we need to provide the infrastructure around the state so that people can buy electric vehicles with confidence and get them charged comfortably wherever they go, not feeling like they're going to get stranded, or they're going to show up to a charging station that's on a map and there's going to be a line of vehicles ahead of them. So these are issues that everybody on the panel is working on. I would say from a conservation commission level, this is something that if you're on a conservation commission, you should be speaking to, or a sustainability committee, to your local governments and your local businesses to see what they can be doing to increase the deployment of charging stations right where people live. So those are my opening comments, but I love being on here with all of my good friends.
Simon, you're muted.
Yeah.
Oh. Simon, you're muted still. There you
Sorry
go.
about it. This is a question that came from one of the attendees. Question for all the legislators. New York passed the CLCPA to much celebration, but since then, the Public Service Commission is conducting business as usual, continuing to allow fossil fuel infrastructure to be constructed with ratepayer dollars. Utilities won't shift to renewables without being forced. Will you support holding a legislative hearing to investigate why the PSC is not making actionable plans to move New York off fossil fuels in line with the CLCPA? And I guess it's only fair to start where we started originally with Assemblyman Englebright. Did you get the gist of the question, sir?
Yes, I got the gist of the question. I am very concerned that we see sort of a selective response to the black letter law and the intent of the legislature regarding climate change. And we are looking at an increasingly bleak future if we do not meet the goals. And certainly the way that we can remedy this is to hold the administrative entities of state government to the letter of the law. The way to do that is to make them feel very self-conscious. And I am very comfortable with the idea of holding hearings just to make sure that there is administrative compliance. I would point out that we have a new governor who I believe is going to hear about this issue during this re-election season. I think that she is likely to also have a more strict adherence to the goals than perhaps the previous governor did. At least I'm hoping that's the case. But certainly I am very interested in holding hearings from time to time just to make sure that we're on track with respect to the goals and the processes leading to compliance with the CLCPA.
Ashley Dougherty, same question. Again, it's a long question, but do you, I can repeat it, or if you got the.
Yeah, I can be quick on this one. I mean,
Sure.
as said, we do have a new governor, and Governor Hochul has already taken a lot of action. As we saw with Climate Week, making strategic investments, and even so quickly, I think it was so quick, he signed the 2035 electric, Senator Harckham's bill, which was huge. That was one of the earliest ones he signed. And we also have to look to the fact that he already made changes to the commission. We now have Commissioner Roy Christian, who has a background in a lot of these areas. And, sometimes you Also want to give an administration time to grow, to see what changes they make. But as we all know, hearings are a great way to get more information, to really dive into the details, and to also allow a level of public participation and to create that level of transparency. So I do think that would be, I know it's really hearings and new administration, but I do think it is interesting to see what the commission will do now with a little bit of change up that has occurred recently.
All right, Senator Harckham.
Thank you. Certainly agree with both Steve and Ashley said. New membership on the PSC, new governor. But there's also legislation in both of our houses, several pieces dealing with gas-powered plants as well as frac gas infrastructure. And so I'm hoping collaboratively that we can take some action along that front, because we do have some legislative ability and authority to curtail some of this, both from a greenhouse gas perspective, but a public safety perspective. At Indian Point, we have a highly pressurized frac gas pipeline 150 feet from a nuclear reactor control room, 200 feet from an elementary school. So, had FERC done its job and the NRC done its job, it might not be there, but this is what we're stuck with now in New York State, is this gas infrastructure. And we need to be careful not to allow more in, because there's a 30-year bond payment to these pipelines at a minimum. So any project we allow to come in, we're stuck with that for the next 30 to 40 years. So we really need a moratorium on the infrastructure as well.
Simon, you're muted.
Should have a voice actuated unmuting button feature. All right, same question to Assemblymember Kelles, please.
Nope.
You're muted now. You're muted.
There you go.
I tried to unmute myself. Yeah, I was actually answering in the Q&A some of those questions. So if you could just summarize the question for me.
Sure. Basically, they're saying that the CLCPA was, really a landmark law that was passed, but our New York State Public Service Commission is really not. They're stating that it's continuing business as usual. They're allowing fossil fuel infrastructure to be constructed with ratepayer dollars. Basically, utilities won't shift to renewables. And they're asking, what is the state going to do about that? Do you sense that that's true? By the way, do you agree with the speaker's position?
I have been concerned, similarly concerned. I think that one of the most important things that we all need to be hold us accountable as a legislator. I am the state, so hold me accountable. Hold the departments accountable. The CLCPA passed. Section 7 of the CLCPA requires that that we, for example, look at the full process from when the oil and gas is extracted all the way through to when it's used. We have to consider the entire emissions from that entire process, upstream process that's supposed to be included in our evaluation of the impact, greenhouse gas impacts of these projects. We are not seeing that is happening consistently, as an example. So, we need these, just for starters, we need these projects. When they put proposals in, they have to explain how they are compliant with the CLCPA, and they need to be evaluated based on Section 7 of the CLCPA. Do they meet all of those standards? I think that's really important. And as a whole, where we should be putting our investments and our money, we should be putting more investments in long-term energy storage. That has been the bottleneck. As all of us know, just as one thing in the energy sector. So how we're calculating what is being the GHG emissions that we can expect, and where we're putting our money with respect to renewable energy infrastructure as well. When we talk about meeting our CLCPA goals, and we say we're at 27%, from my understanding, about 24% of that comes from hydroelectric. So we actually haven't made it that far with respect to wind and solar. So again, we need to look at those calculations and make sure that in all of those sectors we are advancing quickly. And the last thing I'll say is that we can't be increasing our statewide total energy consumption while trying to get our entire grid onto renewable, because then we're creating a moving target. So I think that these applications really should be looked at as a whole package. And if we are creating that moving target, then we're going backwards against our CLCPA. So I'll end there. It's a great question.
Thank you. Assemblyman Otis.
Well, I'm not going to repeat the wise comments of my predecessors there. I would add two things. Number one is emissions. And if we're going to reduce emissions, we're going to have to take out of the picture some of the emissions generators. And so that's going to be some tough decision-making, some tough planning. And I think this is something that the legislature is going to have to come up with a rational strategy to help us meet those goals. And the second piece of it is increasing demand for electricity in places that are maybe questionable. And this is where the cryptocurrency mining issue becomes a paramount issue as a threat to our meeting our climate change goals, because you now have in this one form of cryptocurrency authentication called proof of work, a tremendous energy demand that we have not had to meet. We have not had to create energy to do this activity. This issue is being raised in China. It is being raised in Europe. It is being raised around the United States. It's not just a New York State issue, but we're not going to meet our climate change goals if, whether it's cryptocurrency, proof of work mining today, or some other kind of new need for energy that maybe we don't really need, that someone invents 5 years from now. We used to have something called demand side management and I'm going back 30 years in the world of energy and the environment, was the concept that we didn't have to build a new power plant if we can reduce demand. And that principle still is something that the Public Service Commission works with and our energy policies work with, but we have lots of new increases of demand and some of them are just inevitable as it relates to technology. We have to make sure that where we have new needs for electricity, they are needs that are justified. We have to find ways to reduce needs in other areas and really question any kind of new activity that is creating a new demand for electricity. We have a situation where there's now an interest in reopening closed coal and natural gas power plants, not to serve consumers, but to meet this proof of work mining activity. We need to take a close look at it. Otherwise, we will never meet our very aggressive climate change goals that the legislature passed in 2019.
Okay. So I have another question that says, and again, this could be answered by anyone or all of you. Is there appetite within the state to recognize the plethora of emerging contaminants other than PFOA? And they have included a link to an article coming up from Tompkins County. That's entitled, just pulling it up for a second. It's entitled "Emerging Contaminants, Pharmaceuticals, and Personal Care Products." I guess that's just part of the issue. So is there anyone there that would like to tackle that question?
I'm happy to on that one. First off, it would be important to point to Senator Skoufis's bill that was passed this year, in both houses, awaiting the governor's, which drastically increases the amount of contaminants that would be emerging contaminants that would be tested for. going to actually the contaminants coming out of pharmaceuticals or personal care products. I think that's what's really important, to look at the source. We passed a bill, the other prior year dealing with 1,4-dioxane and personal care products, and to really, they're just going down the drain into the water sources and really polluting it, or flame retardant. So I think it's a combination of, looking at ways to definitely increase testing of what we're doing for emergency contaminants, so we know what's in the wells, but secondarily, like actually cutting off the faucet of some of these more dangerous chemicals through, their direct sources.
Anyone else like to comment?
I would just like to add that, we do need the measurements, but then we also need to define the maximum levels that above which then entities would be considered liable to do cleanup. So there's levels beyond just knowing what's in our systems, but we're not even there. So I would absolutely agree with what Ashley's saying, that first piece is so critical, because then it can help us start the cleanup, and also to hold those who are doing the contamination responsible. Even difficult ones, right? Point source and non-point source. If we can identify them, that's really, really critical, for, as I said, holding us accountable, holding entities accountable.
Okay.
Simon, just quickly also, there are consumer products that we need to look at more closely. Roundup, for instance, a known carcinogen, an endocrine disruptor, that has been, the active ingredient has been banned in the EU. Courts have held Bayer liable for billions of dollars. We have passed legislation to ban it from public land, state-owned land. But, we need to really take a closer look at some of these bad actor chemicals, herbicides, pesticides, and readily available science has looked at a lot of this stuff. Pesticide Action Network is just one of several groups who does work on this. So, these are forever chemicals that really do a lot of damage to folks. And so I think you will see an appetite, measured and prudent and based on science, that we're going to need to take an approach in the legislature in the absence of the federal government regulating some of these chemicals.
I'm going to throw one other thing out there that I think is really important, because environmentalists and farmers so often get pit against each other. And it's unfortunate. We really are on the same, we are all stewards. And part of the reason is because, farmers have been stripped bare. They work 17 hours a day, and they get about 8 cents on the dollar of what the value of the food that they produce. Very often they don't control the prices. They've been regulated, significantly, which I'm not opposed to regulations that are really important, but if we are going to ask them to be part of the climate solution, we should be funding it. If there are capital investments that need to be made to the infrastructure to help them create sustainable agricultural systems, and they are already, we have middlemen, right? We have a system where the seed companies, the pesticide companies, right, like big ag companies, those are the people making the money. Not necessarily in New York State, we don't have those massive, huge farms of 500,000 head of cattle. So we need to work with them and help fund those investments. And if we are saying we need to remove neonics, for example, which I think we absolutely do, then we need to work with them for alternatives. And if we know the alternatives are sustainable ag practices, then we need to work with them and help them. If that means that we are providing grants or subsidies, then that's what we need to do, because the finances are not there if they are already stretched that thin. I have, for example, one farmer who just to pay his bills had to add 200 head of cattle to the 400 that he had. And that was just to cover the bills. If they have to get bigger just to pay their bills, something's wrong with our system. And that was to cover some of the investments that were required to reduce the amount of runoff into the surface water in the area. So increasing the cause of the contaminants into the water in order to address the cost of the contaminants in the water, something's broken in that system. So I just wanted to add that those investments are needed.
Any other comments with that question?
I'd like to just weigh in. I would observe that in the last half decade or so, the personnel within the DEC has been reduced by approximately 1/3. A dramatic disinvestment into the capability of the watchdog and the regulator agency for the environment in our state. Each year when we hold legislative hearings and I get a chance to ask the commissioner, do you have enough personnel to carry out the mission of the department? He answers yes. Oh yeah, we don't need anything else. And so you know, I'm really disturbed by that. That is a falsehood. That is a falsehood that is repeated annually. And as a consequence, when the legislature, when we in the legislature are asked, are you willing to do more? The answer is yes, we are willing to do more, but we're also willing to put money into the budget for those individuals who can make sure that there is a follow-through on any new laws that we pass. Here's the problem. If we just add money after the commissioner says we don't need it, what we have experienced in the past is a budgetary gimmick. The executive branch doesn't add the personnel, and at the end of the year, they say, see how much money we've saved through our frugal practices of administration. Now, that is a part of the problem here. We are not interested in being made fools of, but in answer to the question, are we interested in protecting the people who sent us? Absolutely, we are. So please be, everybody who's on this Zoom, please be aware that there is a need for a general revolt against the falsehood that the agency is adequately funded and has enough personnel to carry out its mission.
Thank you. Any other comments? We're nearing the end of our time. We said we would close down around 7:45. So I'd like to ask a question directed at Steve, but certainly, and it's actually a follow-up comment that member Englebright just made about the DEC. I asked this of Steve because this is something that actually affects NYSACC members directly. Some of you may recall that the state up to the 1990s funded what they used to call LEAP funding, and that money went directly into the pockets of counties to establish environmental management councils. Those councils have been disappearing as quickly as water off a hot pavement. And one of our goals as an association is to support the existing EMCs that are still around, but also see if we can get some money from the state to put back into the counties, because these are essential agencies. You know, where conversation has been on the state level, but on the local level, our association, by the way, is strong. We have a lot of new members. It's expanding, but on the county level, they've collapsed. And so I asked Steve, where's the possibility of going to the state legislature and say, look, this is important. We need to start thinking about refunding counties to reestablish EMCs.
Which Steve are you asking?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. There are two Steves. I was directing this to Steve Otis. And anyone else actually, but I mean, anyone else can answer it, but I just, I know Steve Steve and I go back to that era when we used to go and have, you know, many counties with EMCs, and now it's down to, we made a count, I think it's out of the 63 counties in New York State, there are 15 or 16 left.
I think the challenge is, and that money didn't just go to EMCs, it also went to local conservation commissions. And I think that in some portions of the state, we've seen conservation commissions go away, sometimes because the local elected officials don't really get it and don't really understand it's important. One of the things that kept them in the game in those years with the LEAP funding was local environmental people on those boards could say, keep our conservation commission going, and we're going to get a little piece of basically state aid for that function. So I think that there's a need to revisit that issue with DEC and within the legislature. And but I think I'll toss that to Steve Englebright to figure out how we can solve it, since he's chair of the committee. But the impact is some of these committees are going away, maybe not on Long Island or in Westchester, but upstate. This is, we've seen some of these committees close up, bringing back LEAP funding, which was not a lot of money. I mean, it was a small budget item, would probably help generate more of those municipal boards continuing to exist.
And Assemblyman Englebright.
Well, I'd like to get a sense of what kind of annual investment would be required to restore this network to its full potential. I would also just point out it is very, very important for that matrix of involvement to be as robust as possible. In the absence of that, it isolates those of us who are in state government to talking to ourselves. It is very important that we have these county level constituencies and administrative infrastructure and advisory infrastructure fully engaged and providing us with feedback and enabling us to have a network to get information disseminated to the general populace of the state. So this is a critical part of what we need. And if you can assist me, I'm going to look into it. But if any of you have information in terms of what kind of dollars we're looking at and what the impediments have been, so that we don't have to relearn where where the pitfalls and cautions are, that would be helpful, and I'd be appreciative. Work with my colleagues certainly. I just want to say thank you to my colleagues who are here, Steve Otis and Pete Harckham, Anna Kelles, and Ashley. On behalf of Todd Kaminsky, it is an honor to work with each and every one of you in your offices.
I don't want to close it abruptly if someone wants, because we're actually very close to the 7:45 mark. Is there anybody who wants to make a statement on any issues that were mentioned or talk about anything briefly? Because I
would just add one last thing as far as outreach from the community. I don't, no one should underestimate the power of sending letters to legislators. The one thing that I would recommend, if NYSACC has a really clear vision of what EMCs did and what they could do and what they have been unable to do because of the lack of funding, and the request that could be written and sent out by NYSACC members to their legislators, requesting that that be included as a priority piece of legislation in this coming budget. That can be really powerful. If that is something NYSACC's board wants to put on a legislative priority list to send to legislators, that can also be very powerful. Sending that to the governor to be considered in the governor's One House initial budget. Again, very powerful. So you are an amazing organization, a coalition of people dedicated to the same purpose. So bringing NYSACC together with that in mind and writing that letter and outlining and explaining it and having a clear ask at the end would be very, very powerful. Such a pleasure to be with you all. By the way, for anybody who's here, the people who are here on this call are some of my absolute favorite legislators that I have had the privilege to work with. This is the cream of the crop here. So such an honor.
Simon, you're muted. Simon, you're muted.
He's on a roll.
Okay.
Saying nice things about all of us.
Sure.
Oh no. Oh.
Up.
Good night,
Pleasure to be
everyone.
with
Thank
you
you
all.
so much.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Night all.
Great to
Wonderful.
be with
Take
you
care,
all.
everyone.
Thank you.